Good morning, everyone. I'm informed it is 9:30. That clock's a little bit on the fast side. You'll notice I'm not Jim. He couldn't make it today. So welcome to this meeting of the North York Moors National Park Authority. Welcome to anyone who's tuned in to watch the proceedings. Again, just to remind you, we are live streaming and there will be a recording that's available. Item 2 is the emergency evacuation procedure. I think you're all very familiar. Through the doors, outside, collect on the lawn. We're not expecting any fire alarms, so if it goes off, it will be the real thing. Item 3 is apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Jim Bailey, Pete Williams, John McHugh, David Jeffels, Joy Andrews and Christine Robertson.
Chair, I do have another apology. David Hugo, I spoke with him yesterday, gives his apologies. Sadly, he had been, sorry, I haven't got one. Yeah. David Hugo gives his apologies. He had a meeting this morning which he expected to be afterwards, but they've changed the time, so he won't be able to make it. He's got combined authority one, so gives his apologies. Thank you.
No apologies. Okay, thank you very much. Item 4, public minutes of the meeting on the 23rd of June 2025. Are they all accurate?
Yes.
I'd like to move them. Yes. Moved by Janet, second Clive. Everybody happy? Yep. Thank you very much. Public question time. I don't think we have one. Right, we haven't got one. Item 6 is, as usual, you're reminded it's your responsibility to declare any personal or prejudicial interest before the item, and please use the form that's provided for you. And so on to the main items. The Langdale Moor wildfire. I actually had a drive out there yesterday. I went to Whitby and had a look around, so it was very interesting, I found. But it's over to you then, Tom. Thanks very much.
Right. Morning, members. We thought because it's been such such an important event in the last few months, and more broadly in the context of the national park, that we'd spend some time right at the very start of the meeting talking about the fire that affected Langdale Forest and a fair chunk of Filingdale's Moor over the course of August, and in fact is still smouldering as we speak. Talk a little bit about the authorities' involvement in that and the kind of longer term consequences and implications in terms of our work over the coming weeks and months. So you'll have seen there's hopefully quite comprehensive report in the pack, which hopefully you've all had to digest. And myself, Miles and Tom will give a bit of a presentation summarising various aspects of that. This is a triple act that has not been rehearsed, so there may be a little bit of jumping around between us, but broadly I'll try and set the scene a little bit and then hand over to Miles, who will talk about the impacts as we understand them on the ground, and then Tom will spend some time talking about the way that the kind of recovery work is being set up and our role in that, and then finally we'll just talk about some of the consequences for the National Park Authority. Ideally, I'd like to do questions at the end, just so we can get through it, but there are quite a few slides, so bear with us. Hopefully we'll have broken that down in a way that seems logical and hopefully interesting as well. So why is it not moving on, Judith? That's it. Yeah, move on to the next. No, it's not working at all. Right, let's start with a little bit of a timeline and the area affected. It's perhaps not as clear as we'd like, but I'll try and point it out on the map. So as I understand it, the fire service were called out on the 11th of August to deal with a wildfire that was in this kind of location, kind of north end of Langdale Forest. And then on the 13th of August, a major incident was declared on account of the spread of the wildfire out of the forest and into this area here, bottom of Filingdales Moor. And that was partly on account of the risk of the wind direction taking the fire over this way to the west towards RAF Filingdales, which is of course a piece of critical national infrastructure for the UK and beyond. The red line that you'll see there is the extent of the fire in those kind of first couple of weeks from the 11th of August to around about the 25th of August. And so we were brought in as part of a multi-agency response that was declared in the wake of that critical national, in the wake of that major incident being declared by North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue. And the local resilience forum that's chaired by North Yorkshire Council was set up at that stage. We were brought in as one of the partners at that stage. A number of discussions at the time about the tactics of trying to manage and control the wildfire, which of course has spread into the moor, got into some of the peat within the moor. A number of fire breaks then constructed quite quickly in and around that red location. And for a period of time, I think certainly talking to the Fire and Rescue Service last week, that the fire was in inverted commas under control. And then members, you'll remember August Bank Holiday weekend was quite warm. In fact, it's been quite warm leading up to that. Bank Holiday Monday, we started seeing the reports on social media about big plumes of smoke, again that had kind of lifted over the moor. And what happened is that the fire had leapt from this end of the original location over a fire break and got into the northern end of Filingdales Moor, and then started to move rather quickly with a southerly wind and warm temperature onto the kind of heathland extending up. And the purple line that you'll see is, broadly speaking, the kind of maximum extent of the fire area, which is over 20 square kilometres in total. I mean, various conversations again taking place among stakeholders at the time about the control tactics, risk mitigation, and how to deal with a number of the challenges that were faced. Thankfully, as a result of incredible efforts by the Fire and Rescue Service, by local farmers, landowners, and keepers collectively, the fire was contained. And I'm pleased to see, having been out on site myself on Thursday last week, that is now largely extinguished, save for one or two pockets where, regrettably, it's still smouldering in the peat, largely in the forest area, actually, of Langdale Forest, where the challenges around access of vehicles, because it is in a forest, mean it's really, really difficult to extinguish. And probably, in spite of all the weather that we saw on Saturday, will continue to smoulder for some time. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the kind of scale of the area affected and some of the circumstances leading up to it. I should say there's an active fire investigation underway, and there are lots of questions about what caused this. We don't know at this stage. There are some indications that there might have been an earlier fire in June in a similar location, but whether that is linked or not to the fire in August is impossible to tell at this stage. So I think on account of the fact there is an active investigation by the Fire and Rescue Service, I probably wouldn't want to say too much further about what the kind of initial causes were, whether there are any kind of particular lessons to learn from that. So Judy, should we just
switched on?
what? That's failed the first test of technology, which is actually switching the pointer on. It does work. Oh, remarkable! Remarkable. Hey, I'm missing.
I should have switched it on.
I'm missing a slide. I'm missing a slide there.
I put all the slides on.
Depends when you did it, because I changed them yesterday.
Oh,
Second failure. Note to self: don't do these things over a weekend. Well, it's later on in the deck, but you'll see, we don't have aerial photography ourselves, but a number of, a couple of the agencies and members of the public have been able to get some overhead shots, and there's a great overhead shot that you'll see later that gives a good idea of the extent, but it's hard to describe in words the extent of it. Miles will give a much better impression, having been out about just over 2 weeks ago. But even from the visit that Tom, Miles and I did last week, you can suddenly, when you look out from Jugger Howe over towards the west and look from left to right, you can see the full expanse of the area that's been affected. So it's pretty significant. Right, we're going to move on then, just to talk about the impacts. I'm going to hand over to Miles. Miles, as many of you know, is our head of historic environment. So Miles is obviously his discipline and his key area of focus is on the impacts on the archaeology. But you were out on site with Zara, one of our ecologists, a couple of weeks ago. So you've probably got as good a sense of anybody of the wider impact. So I'll hand over to Miles. Miles, if you want to bring Tom or Ryan in to talk about the other things, by all means do so. But I'll let you do the next bit.
Wait, before I move on to that, I'll just say a few general points about the impact, because it's partially the impact of the fire that is going to be an ongoing concern, but then there's potentially secondary impacts arising from that, and then there's also a bunch of impacts that relate to the mitigation work that's been done to contain the fire. And then on top of that, I'd say it is actually still going, as Tom's pointed out, and scarily enough, it's still going in pretty much the place it started, which tells you something about how difficult peat fires are to deal with once they're started. The other thing that's been sort of a little bit helpful at the outset is that we have the authority has been involved in previous wildfires, and the one that I'm most familiar with, and in fact is kind of where I learnt about North York was actually at a day conference talking about the impact of the 2003 Fylingdales fire. It's actually where I first got to know about a lot about the archaeology of North York Moors. But to summarise on the natural environment side, basically all of the area impacted by the fire forms part of the North York Moors Triple SI. It's also designated SAC, SPA. Known to be a really good area for invertebrates, quite rare butterflies. A stand of juniper, which we think is probably largely removed now, and less certain, but there's a white orchid site, and probably the only surviving orchid site in North York Moors, and we're uncertain as to the status of that. Obviously, there's very significant impacts on both mammals, reptiles, unable to move away from the fire. So we think it's probably had a very serious impact on that. Beyond that, actually loss of the soils that support the vegetation that forms part of the Triple SI designation is going to be very significant. And whilst parts of the area are recovering, there's certainly green vegetation as you look at areas of the wildfire site now. It may not be the vegetation that we'd like to be growing back first. So there's a succession happening. Some plants do very well in that, and some much less well. So there's an interesting challenge there arising out of that. On the visitor side, obviously there's several rights of way that cross the area. Nearly all of the fire site is crow access land. Currently there's removal of access, of crow access, largely because there's a very serious ongoing risk relating to ordnance mostly within the southern part of the fire, but I think blasts were experienced quite widely. That was one of the factors that really hampered the fire services response and meant that it was much more a containment exercise. There's quite likely physical damage to some of the rights of way, both from the effects of the fire and when we were on site, for instance, we saw part of one of the flag sections of Lightweight Walk, and actually some of those flags have been badly affected by heat. Other sections of rights of way will be impacted by fire breaks having been cut across them, and some of those are really quite deep, very rapidly cut bits of engineering. So the surface is gone, and you might have, for instance, clay, which is now backing up and filling up with water. So there's quite tricky issues on the rights of way side. In summary, sorry, Ben provided this. So yeah, in summary, coast to coast and also Lightweight Walk have had sections closed. What have we got? Longer term impacts. The vegetation removed over it, so we may end up with bits of erosion subsequently on some of the rights of way, and potentially, obviously, future capacity impacts on the Ranger service as they manage that. There's also a kind of ongoing issue with when the area is able to be opened up again, either for regular use of rights of way, but also crow access. And as we say, it needs a green light in order for that to happen. We have a little bit of insight on potential impacts to visitor economy, primarily immediate ones around lost bookings and revenue for local businesses. But we think that in time that will also have a sort of medium-term impact as people tend to associate Norfolk Moors more generally. So it might be that there's a more generalised loss of revenue to visitor tourist-related businesses, and also a longer-term, I guess, reputational stigma associated with the damage of the fire. So obviously my specialism is historic environment, and I wanted to use this slide because it actually shows some damage that's probably well over a mile from the actual fire. This is on Sneaton High Moor, where actually 2 or 3 large fire breaks have been cut, but one goes pretty close to the Pickering Whitby Road, and it's slighted the earthwork barrow there. That's an early Bronze Age barrow called Robbed Howe, and as you can see, one side of it has been cut across by the bulldozed fire break. In terms of designated heritage sites, we think there's 21 scheduled sites within the broad area of the fire, several affected directly by the fire, and those range from prehistoric monuments through to World War II. There's a World War II decoy site design, which is basically designed to mimic part of Teesside burning at night. And again, that also relates to the risk of ordnance in the area, which is interesting, tricky thing, historic environment-wise. Historic environment is actually part of the complication for the whole event. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that ordnance risk relates probably in part to 2 firing ranges, one on Wormsite, immediately adjacent to Filingdales and just outside the active fire site, and one on Jugger Howe, which is on the east side of the fire site. Fire was contained enough so that it didn't get into both of those areas, but there have been numerous explosions across it, and it's clearly actually been a very, very serious issue. It was interesting talking to the fire service last week because they mentioned some of the experiences of those of being actually some distance from some of those blasts, but the most recent one, they felt the blast from probably a kilometre and a half away. The other thing I want to mention on historic environment is, and really relates to the 2003, the experiences from the 2003 fire, is that the removal of the peat soils will quite likely have exposed prehistoric land surface, and a lot of the work that my predecessors, Mags Woolman and Graham Lee, were involved in over from the mid-noughties through till 10 years ago, was in dealing with the impacts of that fire and recording the exposed landscape. This is going to be a very different project. It's several times larger in size, and we will have to think about how we prioritise the response. There's a lot less I can say on this, but we do have some information on peat depths across the fire site that's been collected in relation to moorland restoration projects that my colleague Ed March Shawcross has been working on. So we know, for instance, that some area of the site pre to fire had up to a metre of peat, and some areas have much less. This photo is from the Flask fire site. It's the only area where we've actually been able to walk over the ground surface, and it's quite quite telling. So you can see the little root tufts that are growing there. They're potentially 10 to 15 centimetres in height, and where they narrow down, that's showing that you've lost 10 centimetres of peat soil. Beneath that is straight on to mineral. So it's ash overlying mineral soil, quite often clay. And again, that highlights one of the other concerns we have as a secondary impact, is that we've lost this huge area of vegetation. Potentially there's flood risks, sedimentation risks that might arise over the coming weeks. I think it's fair to say, and Tom might chip in, that we will at some stage try and have an attempt to work out how much carbon has been released, how much peat has been lost from the site. But clearly the southern part of the fire area is not going to be accessible for a while yet. This also relates to the photo that Tom was mentioning, and it's a view over the southern end of the fire site. Perhaps I actually have a slightly. That's the one I think Tom was hoping to show. We haven't been able to collect our own imagery yet, so this is borrowed from social media. It probably is about, I'd say, maybe about a quarter of the fire site. So even with aerial photography, it's quite difficult to capture an image that shows all of it. And in fact, it took us quite some time to drive around it, accompanied by the fire service. And although you can see some fairly large sections of the fire site as you drive along the Scarborough to Whitby Road, a lot of it is not readily visible. In time, and hopefully quite soon, we hope to have imagery from Historic England, who are hopefully at some point this week, with the good weather window, able to fly and generate a detailed aerial photographic record of the fire site. And that should give us, to start with, a very detailed boundary for the fire and all of the fire breaks. The mapping we have at the moment is really very crude. It should also give us LiDAR data, which will help us to target areas we ought to be prioritising for visits sooner. I think that's probably more or less what I want to say beyond this one final slide. This is this is on the northwest side of the fire site, where I got taken to a couple of weeks ago now. The fire's obviously on the right-hand side of that dry stone wall, but really interesting that they flailed the other side but didn't need to, because that dry stone wall actually operated quite successfully as a fire break. Anyway, I'll hand over to Tom to take on.
Sabotaged. There we go. Good morning, everyone. So I'm just going to focus on the what the recovery response is looking like, because the actual fire event has now transitioned from that response phase, which was Tom was saying was led by the Local Resilience Forum, into a recovery phase. And with that, various infrastructure is now put in place to manage that transition. So overall coordination of the recovery is being led by North Yorkshire Council, and they have created this recovery coordination group which oversees various subgroups looking at certain facets of the recovery. There's 6 recovery cells or subgroups which have been established. We have representation of all of them, but we lead on the environmental subgroup. So those 6 subgroups are infrastructure, which looks at infrastructure, rights of way, utilities, roads. Economic, which looks at the economic impact and the subsequent funding requirements that need to be put right for the fire site. Environmental, which looks at the environmental and historic environment impacts, which we'll come on to later. Humanitarian, which is looking at to the effects of the wildfire in terms of air quality and impact on the communities around that from the certain pollutants and air quality, let's say. Community, which looks at the community impact and then kind of informing so this isn't socioeconomic, but it's looking at more kind of answering people's concerns and keeping people engaged with that with the fire site and progress on it. And finally, comms, which is that communications piece, which there's been a huge lot of work on this, and kind of both from a safety perspective, but also from kind of trying to dispel disinformation. There's been a lot of chatter around this fire site, around the fire event, and that sits across all of those 6 subgroups. Just to say this, so the RCG meets once a week. Our individual subgroups also meet once a week, and then internally we have a bi-weekly meeting for kind of technical internal meeting, which feeds into those. So each of the 6 subgroups then feed into the RCG, which should be a help there to enable those subgroups to do their job. So what's our role in recovery? Well, initially, it's kind of mitigating the immediate risks and identifying and progressing those immediate issues. So the first issue we've got is understanding the extent of the damage. So that's more about getting access to the fire site in a safe and methodical way. It's then about dealing with the immediate aftermath. So erosion and sedimentation, there's been a lot of vegetation loss, there's been a lot of disruption obviously to the soil structure, and that is going to cause a lot of erosion and sediment. There's nothing to hold the water. We've moved from a very dry, hot phase into potentially, as we saw on Saturday, a very wet phase. So there's going to be a high erosion sedimentation risk, which could cause further damage to the peatland and moorland, also to the exposed historic environment features. But it could be looking at water quality and pollutants as certain heavy metals and sediment gets washed into water sources. It's still a live fire site, so there's ongoing wildfire risk with flare-ups. It's burning subterranean, and it's also, as Tom and Miles said, in the woodland edge. So it's just because there's rain doesn't necessarily mean we're out of the woods yet. Wow, like that one. The ongoing risk to personal, I didn't rehearse that one. The ongoing risk to personal contractors working there, like you said, it's a live fire site. There's a lot of machinery up there, but also there's a lot of still the unexploded ordnance issue going on. So when we're getting access to survey or contractors are there to survey, we need to ensure that that risk is contained. There's risk, obviously, risk to recreational users who are still using it, although the closures are in place. Tom and Miles, as soon as we kind of landed at the fire site for our site visit, a bike rider rode past us quite cheerily. There's the impact on farms and land managers. So obviously, where people have got existing agri-environment agreements, then they can no longer discharge them. They can't graze anymore. So how can we? They have a concern that they would potentially be penalised for not fulfilling their obligations of countryside of stewardship or whatever agri-environment agreements they may be in. So we've had a role in making those connections, certainly in terms of the court leak, to enable them to get access to the RPA in a kind of expedited way to mitigate that risk. There's also quantifying the costs of recovery. It's a huge job, and there's immediate costs, there's costs we've already incurred, and then there's the costs over the next 5-10 years of what recovery will look like. Our main focus of recovery is currently communications. It's still a live fire site. It's still a major incident.
Yeah, I think so.
It might change this week, but we, via our tried and tested communication network and communication partners, are active in trying to get that message across and to inform the public. Landscape restoration, obviously, Miles said how we can put right and improve and reduce future risk in terms of wildfire. So we are leading the subgroup. We'll be assessing the impacts, and we'll be co-designing with our partners and landowners and other agencies what the restoration plans look like. In terms of archaeology, Miles can talk more about this if needed, but obviously it's assessing the damage that was done to existing archaeology, assessing what new archaeology has been thrown up potentially, and protecting and conserving that. So rights of way, we need to, in terms of rights of way, it's still communicating that there are live closures in place, but then it's assessing what needs to be done to reopen them and replace or repair where infrastructure for rights of way have been damaged. Farming is obviously, this is a very kind of hot topic in terms of how we can support land managers who have been impacted from the fire in terms of their farm businesses, and what our role will be in that going forwards in that, potentially utilising FIPL funding to assist in the recovery. There's tourism in terms of engaging with local businesses and trying to address some of the impacts to their business. So we are open for business in a safe manner. So there is a big piece about that. Obviously, like I said, there's some of that is picked up in the economic subcell, but we sit on that one and have an active part. Again, Miles' message about reputation. We don't want to progress with a stigma saying, we are open for business. The landscape isn't trash. This is something that happens and something that we are repairing, but it's a very significant event, but we don't want to be saddled with this, North York Moors is that place that was on fire. In terms of the environmental recovery, this is just a brief slide to show how we're going to approach that. So this is, again, going back into the peatland, the rest of the moorland restoration and the historic environment. Initially, we just need to get a survey. Miles said HE are very handily due to do an aerial survey, a high resolution survey, hopefully this week, which will give us that remote access to the fire site to enable various teams within, whether that be a peatland team, woodland team, historic environment team, to get some kind of ability to do an assessment of where we need to be focusing our efforts in the short term. From survey, we'll go into kind of emergency restoration plans, and this again is about remediation. So this is about what type of activities need to happen in terms of reducing erosion. Potentially there may be siltation traps, there may be stone dams to reduce the immediate impact of erosion and sedimentation as we will go into the wet season as it is. There's also, initially we have to do work around cost analysis to try and work out what the ask is to the RCG group, saying, look, because this is going to be expensive, but we need to have a methodical and data-driven approach to cost analysis. Also, what monitoring do we need to put in place? This is a kind of novel event in its scale in terms we have our wildfires. The science is obviously moving on in terms of our monitoring capabilities. How do we put monitoring in place now that enables us to access funding, but also inform local and national partners about best approaches going forward. And then we move into long-term restoration, which is kind of where we're going in terms of what we do in bread and butter in terms of our more to restore effectively, but it's developing those long-term restoration plans from a fire damaged moor, but significantly with an eye on how we can further mitigate wildfire. We're kind of, this term bands around the Conservation Department, build back better effectively, how we can ensure that we can reduce the likelihood of this happening again. We know we're going to get more wildfires in a warming climate, but there is things we can do in a coordinated and multidisciplinary approach that could reduce those effects. The key considerations, obviously this is a complex live issue with multiple dynamics going on, is how do we harness the expertise from landowners and local communities and key partners and agencies across the patch. So this is a collaborative, data-driven but collaborative approach to restoration. We've got to be evidence-led. This is again a hot topic and a very, controversial topic with multiple opinions and very strong voices. So we need to ensure that what we do and how we develop those restoration plans that reduce future wildfire risk mitigation are grounded in good science. We need to ensure that local landowners and commoners are actively a part of this in designing what the solution looks like. In terms of sequencing, we talked about that. There is a very specific way to do this. We need to ensure that is done appropriately. Learning lessons and building long-term resilience, I've just mentioned that. And funding, this is potentially the short-term funding asks that we need to kind of identify and get online within the first month, but there's also what does the funding route map look like for this over the long term. You know, we need to ensure that we are not just jumping on the first piece of money and then, you know, not building a long-term approach to that, and then it needs to be long-term rather than piecemeal.
Do you want to get this one, Tom?
Yep.
Right. This is the last the last slide, members, and then we can move on to any questions. But this is really a high-level assessment of how the work that has started and will continue is likely to impact on the authority. So I think the first is we've already seen some diversion of staff time and focus rightly in order to focus on a major issue that impacts a reasonable chunk of the national park. There is the potential for some of the cost of the course of the emergency phase to be reimbursed, but there will ultimately be a decision for us as an authority about the extent to which we divert resource away from doing the day job, as it were, to actually focusing on this. At the moment, that feels proportionate manageable, but certainly we've encouraged teams across the authority, particularly in Tom's area, Miles's area, to kind of work out how this might impact on their ability to deliver business plan milestones and other deliverables. For example, some of the work around peat restoration elsewhere in the national park might be affected. There's some remediation work to do around public rights of way, including the Coast to Coast National Trail. Some of those costs are likely to be covered through Natural England in relation to the Coast to Coast, but more widely they'll come ultimately from our maintenance budgets, with a concomitant impact on ranger time in that particular part of the national park as well. So it feels important to do that in the context of reputational stigma, allowing people to get back into the area and access it. It is, as Miles indicated, it's already starting to green up in places as the Millennia grass kind of comes back through. So we need to be able to kind of do that in a logical order once we know we can get on there safely. We know that this is likely to be the kind of short-term remediation, and the long-term restoration is likely to come at a phenomenal cost. The cost of the Fyland Ales 2003 incident, I think, were in the region of a £250,000 in terms of restoration. That was 20 odd years ago, and a site 10 times smaller than the area that's affected here. Now, it's not just about us as a National Park Authority, which is why we're working in a multi-agency way as part of the Local Resilience Forum. That's really important because there's a stake for a number of organisations to assess the impact and look at the longer term costs. But I kid you not, the cost will be significant in terms of restoration and remediation, and we will be looking for sources of funding. There are some things that we might be able to play with. Miles indicated there might be an opportunity to use a little bit of FIPL funding to support some things like fencing, for example, where it's been lost, but I wouldn't overestimate how far that could go. We might also be able to use some of the Section 106 funding, subject to eligibility and subject to approval from the from Anglo American and ICL, and we'll look to do that. But again, it will only go so far in terms of what it can do. So we'll need to, as part of the kind of cost estimation, work out ultimately where the residual lies in terms of those responsibilities for environmental remediation. And clearly, as part of that, we'll be looking for opportunities for additional funding, which might have an impact in diverting some of our resource away. I think just last couple of things from me. I mentioned earlier the community effort. I mean, it brought the best out in local communities, and we saw that, and that was well reported. What I think has been less well reported is just how phenomenal the multi-agency effort has been from a range of different stakeholders working together. Yes, not always, sometimes with the odd tension here and there, but generally I think that's worked really, really well, and I think is continuing through the recovery coordination group that Tom's been representing the authority on. And then lastly, I just want to pay massive tribute to my team for being on it and all over it very, very early on. I've worked in a number of crises. I cut my teeth in the NFU during foot and mouth disease and saw how the military kind of get involved in these things. And to see my team really all over it in terms of working out what's gone wrong, what do we know, what don't we know, what do we need to find out, what can we do about it, working the channels with the landowners and the farmers who sometimes get excluded from these conversations, working the channels with the key agencies has been brilliant. And I think they deserve a massive credit from everybody for all of that. So I think with that, members, we'll stop. And then the three of us very happy to answer any questions. I don't know, Malcolm, whether you want to, how you want to chair this, manage it?
No, thanks, Tom. I mean, first of all, I thought it was a really good report when I read it, and that presentation has just been excellent. I think you've covered all the major bases, all the sorts of things that many of us are thinking about and how we deal with it, and short-term and long-term resources, all of that. So thank you very much for that. I mean, before bringing members in, I mean, just to take the obvious, this is just a major disaster, and it's going to affect the things that we do and other people do for years to come. And just to reiterate your community point, I was just heartened at the way the community immediately responded to the challenges of this fire. And we saw, you know, the photographs of the farmers bringing the water. We heard about people providing facilities for the sheep and horses that, you know, couldn't be there. And it's really heartening the way that the communities come together at these really difficult times. And I think as well, it's very much about the long term. I mean, this, as you say, Tom, this is going to have a major impact on what we as an authority do, and we need to. The there's going to be a shift of the things that we can do. We have a management plan, but this just changes everything, doesn't it? And you know, we have limited resources, and the way that you and the team have already dealt with it, again, just really well done. It's just been a fantastic effort from all concerned, and that clearly needs to be continuing. I'll pause there then, but just I think you know, just well done to all the staff for the way you've handled it. This absolute disaster over the last few weeks. I've got Heather, and then I've got George, and John. We'll go around.
Okay. Yeah, just to say, obviously, as one of the members, I think we're extremely proud of the way it's been handled, again, you know, all the way through. Few things there. I mean, the recovery coordinating group, I mean, it's brilliant. I mean, who's the leading officer from North Yorkshire Council on that one then, Tom?
It's Rachel Joyce.
Rachel Joyce. Okay, thanks. Obviously, this Bellwind scheme, I think this it was Kevin Holdrick that raised this originally about it being an emergency down, and obviously they endorsed it. So, in practical terms, Tom, I mean, obviously, we've got to look at, we're going to have to come up with some figures of money. I mean, do you have to sort of like bid for this funding? And will the other, you know, task holders in there all be bidding for bits of money? I mean, are we going to be, how does it, do not go into so much detail? I mean, is it not going to be an arduous thing where we've got to put something forward and they're going to come back to us? We need to get on with it. That's just one thing. I'd like to think there's no mention of the RAF being involved. They put those things, and all for the good, back in the 50s or 40s, whatever it was. But I think the RAF have probably got resources of manpower, which I think that we should push for that to be used on. We have people, I accept that Farlingdales, they're not the ones that come out in the tanks or whatever, the ones sitting in there watching what we're all doing. But I do think that we should be asking the RAF to contribute in their way. They probably could be helpful as an exercise. I'm not sure if that's possible. And that was one point. And again, going back to the fact that, as you say, the priorities, lots of things. But one of the things, obviously, the coast to coast, as George has done his footwork on that. It'd be nice to see that somewhere along the line, if possible, that could be one of the prioritised. If that's, you know, if it fits with them. Could you give me any idea what mileage there is involved and what part is affected on that? I mean, is it any idea?
On the last one, not until we're able to do it. I don't know whether Bernie's been able to.
Well, I mean, are we talking about 5 miles, 20 miles approximately? It would be interesting to know what we're facing on there. Thank you, Joelle.
Just clarify, it's probably about 2 miles in total, mainly across the top end of the moor between where Maybeck car park and it crosses the moor and goes up onto Greystones and that area as well.
Okay.
So it's that's the main affected part.
I mean, I think we'd all agree that it's going to, you know, we have all a lot of emphasis on that. And we're talking about getting, as long as it's safe and everything. But yeah, I think that, you know, it's great you've come together. And just to go back in time, I remember when I was about 10, that's a few years ago, there was massive fires across the top, all along the top behind, from, I think, Swainby across that side. And I remember thinking, oh, I was going to get burnt alive because the same things are happening. So there will be some historic sort of evidence of how they handled it, but things have moved on and situation. But I mean, I'm suggesting for safety. I mean, I don't know how long that actually. My father kept telling me it would burn for years. I'm not sure if it still is, but I remember as a small child being told about this. So there must be some sort of information there to be given a bit of detail on.
And we have some of the information on previous wildfires, particularly the 2003 Farlingdales fire, which was the other side of the main Whitby Scarborough, but different scale, different landscape as well. Quickly on Tom may want to come in on the Bellwind scheme. I think first thing, I'm not aware that it's a competitive scheme. It's ultimately it's about funding that central government releases to local authorities to deal with emergencies. It can only look backwards, so it won't deal with any of the restoration costs, but it might help deal with some of the short-term costs, and particularly those costs that have been incurred, which are not insignificant, by North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service and others. So I wouldn't put, from our point of view, although there may be opportunities, I think really this is the focus for that is going to be on the kind of agency response in dealing with the disaster. In terms of RAF, I mean, look, they were involved as part of the strategic coordination group, involved in terms of putting in place their own mitigation to reduce the reduce the risk of the fire spreading over onto MOD land. So I think although we haven't mentioned it here, they have been involved and have been involved extensively. They aren't the landowner. For the bulk of the site that's affected, much of it is, some of it is Forestry England, some of it is in the land owned by the Strickland Estate, who we're engaging with as part of our efforts. So I think one thing that I know Historic England have been working with RAF on relates to those flights, because of the location. It's a sensitive area to do flyovers, but they have been amenable to allowing Historic England to undertake those flyovers that help us get a better kind of understanding of the impact on the land area. So they have been supportive and helpful.
Thank you.
Right, thanks, Heather. Members, you'll be aware that virtually everybody put their hands up to speak, so I can just ask you to try and keep your questions as concise as possible, and we'll go in the order that so everybody will have a chance to speak. I think we've George next.
Thank you, Malcolm. I'm going to be very brief because most of the points have already been covered, but I just want to I think that we should extend our thanks to not only the work that's been done by the local forum, local resilience forum, and the team at the North York Moors National Park Authority, but also the wider community and the volunteers and everyone who helped in this tremendous effort in dealing with this. I'm glad that we've got this report in front of us today in this public meeting. I think it's important. I raised it at the time of the FRASC meeting, and there was a question and hesitation about how much could be shared. But I think from today's presentation, we think that I think that there has been the right balance of information that's come out in terms of what we know so far, and with the caveat that there is still a lot of unknowns that we won't be able to appreciate and realize for some time, weeks, months, and possibly years. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot then, George. It was John, then it was Michelle, then it was Jane. John.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, up until this morning, of course, most of us will only have received, we've been paying attention, and we've been watching, reading newspapers and watching the television broadcast, but this it's incredibly helpful report, excellent report, hasn't it been this morning? A brilliant presentation. We're talking about short, medium and long-term parts of the process. When we talk about, can you give us any more idea about timelines? When, you know, how long is it going to be before we see that Heather Moorland restored to what it was before this fire?
I don't think I can, John, until we can actually get out on site and get a better understanding of the strata and the impacts. The effect is not uniform, partly because the topography and the land is not uniform that we're dealing with. We know that some parts, as the pictures illustrate, have been heavily denuded of both vegetation, but also the underlying soil and strata that's burnt in the fire. There are other parts where the fire moved through really, really quickly, and there is a chance of the land regenerating. We're seeing some of that regeneration taking place already. Much will depend on the underlying presence of the seed source, whether that kind of bank exists that allows, in combination with soil and wherever any peat remains, the ability to actually regenerate. But until we actually get out, we really don't know that. I think our initial sense, though, is that the area that's been affected is quite significant, and therefore the extent of intervention and the ability of the land to ultimately repair itself will take, certainly where peat has been burnt away, will be generations. It will take many decades. Tom, do you want to come in? You'll need to use the mic to the top. By all means, use that one if you want all this one.
Just just Tom said that in somewhere the peat loss is so severe it will never regenerate in millennia effectively, unless there was a peat forming event, which you're not going to get anytime soon. So I think we have lost some of that. Won't be coming back. I think there's something about the communications piece is when we get this greening in this immediate season. I think that's good, but it's not necessarily optimal. So we need to kind of manage that. Although it's looking better, there's significant conservation objectives that need to be done to actually ensure that the landscape is working in its optimal sense for climate, for nature, for people. So that's an interesting issue to resolve.
Can we get a copy of the slides as well? I found them.
Yeah, no, sure. We can share a copy of the slides. I mean, I think the other thing Tom was hinting at it then, in terms of looking at long-term restoration and whether building back better is the right phrase, building in long-term resilience. We will, along with the landowner, who's obviously an important agency in all of this, need to look at whether there's a way of ultimately designing in a land management that might make the landscape more resilient. I think point to note, because of some of the climate modelling work that we and others have done, we know that wildfire risk is growing, and that's not going to go away. There will be another wildfire at some point in the North York Moors. Trying to learn some lessons that we can from that, not just in terms of the immediate interventions, but also longer term, building in longer term resilience in terms of land management, which includes how you manage heather moorland is going to be a key part of that.
Yeah, first, just briefly to echo the comments, particularly about the various agencies, but in particular, I think the people who volunteered, a lot of people wouldn't have done so. So I think it's quite amazing how many people went above and beyond in those circumstances, because they were extremely difficult. Funny enough, you meant Belwyn came up on the slides during the presentation, just as I was thinking about it. But the issue with Belwyn is, as you said, it looks backwards, it doesn't look forwards. And what you've described to us here is a lot of things that are medium, potentially long-term pieces of work that need to be done, because there's an awful lot at the moment. We don't really have an assessment of where we are or what we think needs doing. And I think that's not unreasonable given how soon we are after this event. And I think, as people say, some things may naturally work, but some things may need some management and some interventions. I suppose the question then is, how realistic is it going to be that recovery effort can be managed through the normal budgets of the various agencies involved? And has there been any indication from government or any other outside bodies that they would be willing to look at costed efforts to as part of that recovery effort?
I think I can safely say in response to the first question, Michelle, that it can't be accommodated within existing budgets. I mean, especially in our case, when those revenue budgets have already been cut by 8% in this financial year, and we're waiting to see what the outcome of spending review round 2 is. So it will require some additional effort. There's been no indication from central government. I think it's important, though, before we make a concerted effort to approach central government beyond the Belwyn formula, that we have a really good understanding of costs and remediation efforts. Otherwise, that is likely to be a challenging conversation. Other agencies, we're having some initial discussions with other partners in the multi-agency approach, like Natural England, the Combined Authority. Tom's having conversations with Combined Authority. So there are others who may be able to support in part some of the, particularly those immediate kind of restoration costs that we need to try and make sure the site is secure and shored up as much as possible.
Thank you. And again, to reiterate, having heard at our members' meeting all that our staff have been doing and the effect that it had obviously had on you, I think that's a really key to say about just thank you. And also to the volunteers particularly, and having spoken to them as well, some of them had the same sort of feelings and things that you had. So I think we've both got a physical thing to deal with, and we will have a mental and other thing to deal with as well. And I think that's something to make a note of, that finances don't just necessarily have to go into the physical. Anyway, on that, I'm really sorry, I do have a couple of questions. So, health and safety. I was just thinking about that, and I'm sure that's because I don't know the things, but will these ordinances, that perhaps will they be less stable? So when we reopen things, do we have to do different assessments? Just a question.
I think it's probably straying beyond the bounds of our competence as an organisation. It's where we're reliant on the advice of other agencies. At the moment, as we indicated, there's an access restriction on the whole of that area, precisely because there is and was live unexploded ordnance that might have become exposed through the fire, and additionally more volatile because of the presence of heat around it as well. And I think until we get the all clear from the key agencies involved, and this has been picked up under the infrastructure cell that Tom mentioned earlier, then we'd be reluctant to kind of get into a conversation about ordnance.
Brilliant. So it's not our responsibility then?
Well, I think there's a collective responsibility as a group of organisations, certainly to advise the general public not to access the area precisely because of that. But until we get advice from experts in that area, then I think it's, Miles, do you want to come in? You need to use the mic, Mike. Sorry, Miles.
Thank you. Just to say, in an overall sense, it's not our responsibility, but we are going to overlap with that issue, particularly when it comes to appraising and doing the survey work on the moor. The people doing that are going to encounter ordnance, so we need to make sure they have the right training as to know how to respond to that, to identify it so that it can be dealt with safely. And obviously that is the overlap between ordnance and ongoing heat that seems to be the main issue. But as you were saying, some of that may not have triggered, and obviously we need to wait and see what the view from the MOD and other experts on that is.
Thank you. And then my next sort of question is, again, speaking to some of the volunteers, some of them were feeling that perhaps they haven't been brought to the party in engagement, and it may be that they don't know, or their associations or whatever have not wanted to come to be part of the rebuild. And so I was just seeing, is there any reason why the Moorland Association isn't on that? When you gave me the list, we had a briefing of all the list of all the people that were involved in the group. Is there any reason why they're not on the recovery in the groups that have been brought in to be part of the discussion?
I think the key organisations that have got a direct interest in the ownership of the land in question are involved in the recovery group. Certainly our environmental side. But
not specifically, not the Moorland Association. Okay, because obviously they have a lot of experience and a lot of their members were involved in it.
Yeah, and I think the members who are involved in the land ownership around the site are involved in the environmental side.
Okay, so they will be represented.
They're represented through the members who are involved in the environmental side.
I think that's the point. There's overlap, isn't there, between the members of the association and the sorts of people that will be involved.
But you've got people like the NFU involved as a group, and so I didn't understand why they weren't involved, if you see what I mean. So you've got different people, so that's why, if you've got the NFU, why haven't you got them, if you see what I mean?
Sure, understood. Yeah, okay. Well, we can take a look at that. But I'm satisfied that at the moment the right people are involved in the group.
And just the final thing is the long-term science study, which I think is absolutely vital for us to learn the lessons and use it as a long-term study. Presumably, we may well not get government money on that. That may be something that we have to look at partnershiping with or whatever. But I think it's something, and I know it will involve quite a bit of us looking at how we get together or how we work with other agencies. I do think long-term it's a really important thing for the environment and for communities that we are involved in something like that, even though it's going to be financially.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the learnings are objective and evidentially based, and not based on kind of opportunistic statements, which I've heard quite a few of in recent weeks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Colin. Oh, Janet.
Thank you. A lot of the points have been raised already, so I'll be as brief as I can. Thank you. Thank you all very much. There's no telling the emotional toll, as Jane said, the emotional toll this will have on the teams, volunteers, communities and all the partners. So thank you very much indeed, and I hope you all give yourself time to recover, because it has been an emotional drain. Thank you very much. Belwyn. My understanding of Belwyn is it repays the costs of the emergency. So Michelle's right, it repays. So all we can do is hope that we work together, and not just as a national park, but work together, because there's a ceiling, isn't there? You have to have incurred a certain amount before you can even apply for the Belwyn scheme. So it's possible that if we did it on our own, we wouldn't actually get to that ceiling. So we must please think about working together as a forum and make sure that we get our contribution of those costs. So it is repaying costs. It's not forecasting what next. That's what the scheme is about. Usually in floods, usually in not incidents like this. So that was one thing. Please can we work together to do that? Jane's questions. Absolutely. The walker would not go out walking thinking, oh, must remember there's a bit of ordnance down there that might explode, you know. So it is it is a responsibility, a collective responsibility to inform people, because you know, and you can only imagine if something did happen, the claims that would follow. So it's really important that we think about these things. And those were just the bits that I wanted to add to the conversation that we've had. But I think it's just been such an extraordinary effort. And Malcolm, there is no question in my mind that this is a disaster. Agreed. However, please may we refer to it as an incident. Otherwise, if we say it's a disaster, that will continue to give the worry for people coming to the park that there's a problem. It is an incident. It's a major incident that we've been dealing with and been dealing with well. And that's not brief, is it? But anyway, that's the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
No, I mean, they're not questions, but just on that last point, I would entirely agree, and I am concerned about the reputational stigma to the area in question, but also the national park, and we have a direct line into a number of tourism businesses through the North York Moors tourism network and the contacts that we've got with the tourism group that works along that part of the Yorkshire coast, and although some of the immediate impacts have been mitigated, they are concerned about the ability to kind of bring back repeat visits, which, as the slide illustrated, are the biggest reason why people come back to visit, because they've been before and had a great experience. And so when people actually were to see the site as it looks now or experience it, then that will be a challenge. So it's really, really important that we do our bit. We'll be thinking about how we can work our tourism campaigns in coming weeks and months to ensure that we kind of continue to give people reasons to want to come back to the North York Moors and that particular area around Providence Bay and so on that is close to the fire site.
I just use that word to emphasise to any government members that were listening that there is this finance. Anyway, say no more. Colin.
Yeah, just can I reiterate our thanks to all the volunteers and people that have actually worked on this fire, because it's been a truly hard task altogether. But moving on, I still see walkers walking up the 1 in 3, walking across the Slights Moor down towards Littlebeck. Now, I don't know whether they're on the coast to coast or whether they haven't found out about the moor being closed further back, and I just wondered whether there was signs up at the end of the toll road or the bottom of Fairhead. It's a bit of a divil if you get walked up that 1 in 3 and then you realise when you get to the top you have to go back down again. You know, I wouldn't like to do it, but you know, if there's people still doing the coast to coast and not pulling off to go on the Esk Valley Walk before you get to Gromont, then you know, they'll be a bit upset. Like another one is, can we get the more landowners to burn the heather in strips, not the little squares that they're burning at the moment. If they burnt a strip, maybe, you know, full width of the moor or full length of the moor, you know, so that you did actually burn a fire break into their daily work. I know they say they want a bit because this grouse pair wants to be nesting here and that, but it would help on both sides if there was a fire breaks burnt in as their daily work went along. But, just an idea.
Yeah, I'm loath at this stage until we've properly understood the circumstances around the cause and then subsequent spread to kind of get into detailed discussions about what specific interventions will be necessary to mitigate risk. Undoubtedly, there will be something about fire risk management, but I wouldn't want to kind of be too specific about this at this stage. Partly because one of the reasons that the fire spread by overcoming a fire break. So there's something there about the kind of fallibility of even some of those interventions that can be put in place. So I think I want to be a bit cautious about going too far there, but I'll bring Joel in to answer about the coast to coast.
Yeah. Yes, in terms of the information that's been provided, when the initial incident took place, we did an emergency closure which took effect from Gromont, and we diverted people on the Esk Valley Walk. It was the sensible and safest way, but we were aware that that did create some impact, in particular to local businesses in Littlebeck, for example. So as soon as it was safe for us to be able to reduce the level of closure, we were able to introduce a secondary diversion, which was much more closely aligned to the actual route. So you can get as far as Littlebeck, and then you have to take the road and then go up and take another road, which ultimately takes you to Horsker, which takes out the section which is still as yet properly uninspected, so we can't reopen it. So the idea being that signage is there. So certainly closure signage was put up. So in effect, people would have been walking past a closure notice that legally tells them that the route is closed. In reality, we're not a police force. We can't go out and enforce that. But one thing that we were really keen to do was to make sure we spread the word as much as possible. So front page of our website with alternative routes. There's a lot of coast-to-coast Facebook groups and other social media groups, and we were spreading the word via them, and local businesses further up the route have been really helpful in alerting people, especially people who don't have English as their first language. We know that coast to coast is a very attractive route for visitors from overseas. So we just wanted to make sure that nobody was unaware of the incident. And of course, as you got closer to it, the smoke was such that you'd be aware that something was happening and what plans were in place. The feedback has been pretty universally positive in terms of the alternative route and the communication. And as I say, we were able to deal with the particular issues about Littlebeck and the businesses there as well. So hopefully everybody is understanding. And again, we just reiterate the plea that if there is a closure notice in place, please do not go past it and access that mall, because we haven't yet had that inspection and that risk assessment. So notices are extant until they are removed.
And the National Trails website also reflects that information as well. So they are on board and trying to promote the message. So it has been truly a multi-agency approach.
Thank you. Just two more points if I can before we go any further. You say FIPL is available for some. Have the farmers been told that FIPL is available so that they could apply to, I know it's to be used by end of March, and time's running short, and I know there's a lot of wires still up, but there's a lot of posts burnt out sort of thing, and will need replacing. If that's, just as the farmers being told about it. And the other one was if the fire's still in the forestry at the far side of where it's burnt to, can they start filling in the fire breaks that were dug out to to start remediation work, rather than waiting for another 3 or 4 months when it might be a bit wetter to even do that. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So I think on FIPL, just to be clear, so we think farming and protected landscapes funding could be eligible where it helps to meet the costs of restoration. So where reinstatement of fencing is associated with a broader kind of land management, restoration, we think it could be eligible. So we are in contact with the Filingdale Commoners, and we're also in contact with a group that's been set up by the NFU Whitby office, bringing together a number of farming charities and ourselves to look at how collectively we can help some of the farmers that have been affected either through loss of grazing or through loss of infrastructure. We don't obviously don't know everybody, but I think we've got enough of a enough lines of communication with key people affected to know that may be eligible, and hopefully there'll be an application coming forward in the not too distant future to at least deal with some of the infrastructure costs that people should be able to meet. On the fire breaks, I don't have an answer to that at this stage, Colin. I know it's part of the conversation that's taking place within the infrastructure cell about how they can be reinstated. Tom, do you want to come in?
So just on the fire break stuff, I think there is some initial remediation work that can happen potentially, and I think the multi-stakeholder group are looking at how some of it could be done via Bellwin funding, which obviously alleviates a future cost. One of the complications, and it's always the complication with this, is the ordnance issue, is there may be in those spoil heaps. So there's two issues. In those spoil heaps, there may actually be unexploded ordnance that's actually in there. So that has to be considered. It's been pushed up into the spoil. But then also from our perspective is how you remediate, how you put those things back, particularly in triple SI and peatland, how you put that fire breaks back in a way that gives the habitat its best chance of regeneration, because it's not simply just dumping it back. It needs to be done in a considered process. So as with this fire, everything's a little bit complex.
Thank you, Chair. Everything's been said about recovery and whatever else, but I would like to just say about what I found to be very, very positive, and that's that in the last 2 weeks I've been to every one of the local parish council meetings. So that's Estelside, Farlingdales, Horsker, Sneaton and Statendale, and every one of them praised all the authorities for all the hard work which they did. A lot of those on the parish councils there actually went on the moor themselves with tractors and that as farmers. So they said they did 100% what they could do. They could not say anything bad about any of the authorities, especially highways, which usually get knocked by everybody. But they said their road closures were first class, the way they had men patrolling it and were friendly and diverted heavy goods wagons around, and everything was very, very positive. They do know that it's going to be obviously an inquiry, and they all look forward to putting their thoughts into this inquiry. And really, that's all I've got to say, is because everything else has been said. Other than that, the one girl in Egton who actually did the fundraising, and she did crowdfunding, and that funding is up to £75,000 now. And that money initially she was only hoping to bring in maybe £300 to help feed the farmers and other agency people while they're up on the moor. So she's done an amazing job. Yeah. So thank you everybody for their hard work. Thank you.
No, thank you, Clive. That's a very good way of ending this discussion. Just two thoughts from me, I think, before we do move on. First of all, thank you for all the points that you've raised and the responses that you've given, Tom. I'm sure there are people listening to this that we don't know who they are, but they will have got a very clear understanding of what's been happening, who's been doing things, how we're looking at resolving this incident going forward. And the second thought is that how we resolve it is, you've heard from a number of members, and we're all very much aware about the community involvement in all of this. And it's vital that we continue to involve the community as we are doing, and work together with the authorities as a group that we'll get things done. And as a number of members have said, it's not just over the next days or months, it's years, it's tens of years. This is going to have a long-term impact. So thank you again for the work that you've done. And clearly we'll come back as an authority to decide, when we're a bit clear about resources, to decide what we are going to do, what we're not going to do that we would have done, and how we can move from where we are to the better place that we're heading for. So thank you very much for all of that. And now we move on to talk about car parks. I've had a request for a 5 minute. Do you want to, literally 5 minutes, please?
Yes.
Okay. Back here at 11 o'clock then, please. Can we just turn things off, please, Judith. And I will put this on so that they can hear me say thank you for all being so punctual. We're now on to item 8, something entirely different about the car parks. So over to you, Lucas.
Yeah. Right. Good morning, members. I'll do a very quick and brief introduction. I'm Lucas St. John. I'm the commercial manager and I'm responsible for our car parks operations and our national park visitor centres. I do have, in terms of a presentation, I do have just a couple of slides, so I won't be talking long. I know there'll be a big opportunity here for questions given the topic. But yes, there are just some key messages and key topics that I do want to kind of reiterate, but to note that all the details is in the paper itself. So as a starting point, why are we pursuing enforcement and through ANPR? Well, one of the driving factors for this is non-compliance. Now, non-compliance, for those who don't know, are the members of the public that aren't paying for the tariff when visiting our car parks, our operations and our facilities. Now, this has been a topic of conversation within the authority for quite some time. And it's been concentrated over the last year where we've met and had various discussions, and there's been actions and developments within our own kind of operational delivery as we've tried to positively impact non-compliance. Despite those efforts, unfortunately, we're seeing our non-compliance percentages rise, and certainly in certain locations as well. And the reason I'm proposing this or pursuing this avenue is because I feel that we've got to a position now where this isn't sustainable for us to operate in this area with the current, I guess, environment that the authority finds itself in, but with the loss of revenue that we're seeing at our locations, and not having a mechanism to challenge this with a considerable tool to combat it. In terms of the ANPR and enforcement, how are we going to be approaching it within that framework and within that process? Well, we're going to be delivering it exactly the same way as we are now. So we are wanting the public just to pay for our tariff. We're not looking at drumming up or creating additional income through excessive fining. And when it does come to our fining, we are just looking at recovering the parking fee itself. So not looking at additional revenue here. Fairness. So we're looking at making sure our operations are fair to all of our visitors when it comes to paying and accessing our site. So we don't want to create an environment where we've got those that are paying subsidising those that aren't. And there are particular situations like at Newton under Rosebery where we often reach capacity in the car park, and we cannot have situations where we have nearly 20% or 50, 1/5 of the car park that has unpaid users using that facility and accessing those facilities for free. This is a persistent problem, so non-compliance is something we've been talking about for a while. We have at Newton under Rosebery, we've seen the percentage increase over the last year, which is unfortunate, but we do have non-compliance percentages across all of our sites, and it is an issue that we are facing. And at Newton, just to highlight that 17.7% is worth around £25,000 worth of lost revenue per year. With the launch of ANPR and enforcement, we would be looking to promote a lot of the value for money elements that we have for our car parks. And so for Newton, just as an example, for our regular users that access the site, we have frequent user permits, and we've been working a lot in this area recently. So we have far more faster and efficient facilities for delivering this, but they're incredibly good value for money. So the frequent user permit is £30, mapped over the year is worth just 57 pence per week. So for those regular users to our sites, including Newton, there's a lot of value in terms of value for money. And just, 5 days all day parking is the cost to recoup against the permit. So there'll be a lot of emphasis around those value for money options. Then in terms of efficiencies, so over the last year, or I guess as we've been focusing in on non-compliance, our teams on the ground have been focusing heavily on how we can positively influence non-compliance. So our wardens have been very proactive in this space, especially over the last year, to see if we can influence it ourselves. So with an introduction of a partner, it's going to free up a lot of staff time on the ground. It's going to help us progress with non-compliance substantially, and it's going to deter misuse of the site. And I just want to pick up this point because yesterday we had a break-in at Newton under Rosebery Toilet, and the gents have had substantial damage done. It'll be in the thousands to repair it. Now, NYMNPA and cameras would definitely be a deterrent against those that committed that. So, yeah, a bit unfortunate there. In terms of this and why we're pursuing this one and sort of the framework for it, I'm looking at this enforcement option and NYMNPA with a 12-month pilot. So this is an opportunity for us to understand and monitor the impact of this, and we're looking at it at just one site, Newton under Rosebery, where we have got the highest level of non-compliance. But yes, giving us a year to understand how the public react to it, how our teams deliver it, all of those questions that we need to gather answers towards. Within that 12-month period, we're looking at engaging the Rec and Wellbeing Forum, where we can give updates in terms of the progress of the pilot itself. We've created a success criteria and some KPIs that we can come back and report to in terms of that forum. And these are just a few that we would be discussing. So things like a substantial drop in non-compliance, so reduced non-compliance, increased revenue, and that's not increased revenue through fining, that's increased revenue through the day tariff, so just the day tickets. Minimal reputational impact, those operational efficiencies, so the staff time saved on the ground, reduction in antisocial behaviour, and then an increase in our permits, so those frequent user permits that we were talking about. Reputation, so appreciate that this would be a big lift and step into this forum, so reputational risk is a big topic here. What I've been doing over the last 5 months with the car parks team is having a lot of conversations with various different partners, so that and having those negotiations so that we could create a framework that delivered fairness but gave the authority total control in this. And that's something you'll see in the detail, is the authority has control of every step of the process and is able to prevent things moving forward or stopping something going to a fine, any of those sort of stages, we have that control over. So not driven by excessive fining and not driven by profit. Then scalability, so this is a pilot for the first year, but we do have issues and high non-compliance in other locations, so we would be looking at scalability within this model and how this could be rolled out to other locations. And again, that's another part of that pilot process that gives us the opportunity to have the details as we move to the next step, which is market readiness. So as a team, we need to definitely understand how this is landed on the ground, how the public react to it, how the systems integrate with our existing systems and how that's delivered. So there's lots of questions there that we want to understand and refine through that pilot mechanism and the discussions in the Rec and Wellbeing Forum, but that will allow us to get a specification ready for our financial regulations, our procurement process beyond. So after the 12-month, how we go to the next step with a larger contract with a larger end date, but we would have developed that specification to get a more accurate offer, I think, for our needs. And also, just to add in there, is that because we've got cameras on site, is that we've got data, exact data. Those cameras give and supply an awful lot of data for us. So again, that can be used for procurement. And I guess just a specific one from me around some of the sort of finances here. So although we're not looking at creating excessive income generation from this. Just to note that this will pay for itself because there is an ask for some equipment costs within that, but I believe the forecast of our core tariff and how that the non-compliance reduces against the core tariff will allow us to pay for the equipment costs. So there isn't going to be a cost to the authority with the delivery of this. And then just finally is, the sort of policy here. So that, and the point of presenting this is that I'm seeking member approval for ANPR enforcement at Newton-under-Rosebery for a 12-month pilot. And then also, if successful within that, to move to the next step to look at other locations. That's everything from.
I'll just bring Tom in.
I think just before we open this up for questions, there's obviously quite a comprehensive report in the pack that sets out the basis for the proposing a change in policy around enforcement, as well as this particular pilot around ANPR. We've also provided members some additional information as a private appendix. If members feel there's information in there that we need to go into, we'll need to go into private session to discuss that. But we'll see how we go with the discussion. And over to you, Malcolm.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I was just going to emphasise that at a point, members have seen some commercially confidential information. If you intend to say anything at all about that, would you please give me notice before you say a word, because we'll have to turn the transmission off and have that discussion. I'm hoping it will not be necessary, but make sure you don't say anything without first mentioning it, and we'll turn it off. Subject to that, and I've forgotten, there's one, Joe, George, John, and somebody over here. Janet.
Thank you, Malcolm. And also, in addition to the information that Tom mentioned, we had actually a very extensive and beneficial discussion about this at the members' update back in August. So this is something that has just not come out of the blue here. It is being deliberated and been thought about for a while. I have been thinking about it since we had the update back in August, and I fully support the suggestion. And as you say, it's not driven by profit, but even if it were driven by profit, averting losses and making sure that we maximize value for a taxpayer is not a bad thing, because from a reputation perspective, we are trying to ensure fairness for all those who are accessing the national park, and make sure that that car parking facilities are available for as many people as possible who are paying the correct amount. Because with the example you mentioned, where 20%, where the car park is full and 20% of those who are not paying, for example, for their car parking tickets, then that's unfair for those other potential 20% who could have visited the national park and are unable to do so at that point. So as a result of that, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Lucas, for this very clear, comprehensive report, which is evidence-driven. It's quite simply wrong, isn't it, that we expect members of the public who do pay their car parking charges to subsidise those who choose not to pay. And I believe that in the overwhelming majority of cases, they will do that willfully as well. So I've got no hesitation whatsoever in seconding these proposals. It's just the right thing to do.
Thank you. Also, thank you for the report, and I agree with the recommendations too. We can't, excuse me, because Colin and Heather will know better than I on this one as FRASC members, but we can't make a profit. That is not what we do. We get the cost and we repay the cost back, and it should be hypothecated back to the car park. So it isn't about income generation. It has to be cost recovery. And I know this from an example of trying to ask coaches to park in Helmsley many, many years ago. and thinking that, you know, so I think we just need to be careful about this, because there is, and if Pete were here, he would tell me whether I'm right or not, but I feel pretty confident. So I'm glad we're doing it. I'm glad we're recovering costs, because that is what we need to do. And I think that it's going to be really interesting to see where the people are who aren't paying, because I have this suspicion that there are local people who are just trying to do something, you know, so it's going to be really interesting about that. So good luck with it. And I'm so sorry that there's been vandalism. I'm so sorry that that happens. It's just, you know, the one thing I would just like to see if we could ever get to the point where we can move the conversation on for about costs to paying. We're actually paying to receive this view. We are buying something as opposed to being charged for something. And if we can start to help manage that in our minds, then I think it's going to be extraordinarily good value for money. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It is financially, I'm going to mention, and it is going back to Frask on the 3rd of February when we voted in the amount of charges we were paying at the car parks, which at that time we were putting it up by 25p, I believe, to £4.25 for the over 2 hours. Now, after that, it was put up a bit further due to the national insurance contributions, and after that, well, the authority thought, well, we've had a cut of so much, so which they tell me it did come through NPA in March, but to be fair, I didn't pick it up, and I was really taken back when a member of the public actually wrote to the parish council at Gromont and said, well, we think it's too much to charge £6 over 2 hours. And I said, well, we ain't put it up that much. And I actually went in, and yes, it's £6. It's £6 at Huttonley Hole. I went into Goathland, and it was £4.50, and I was a bit taken back with that as well. But you know, yeah, if that's the way forward, you know, rather than it being come in where it wasn't mentioned too much, or we didn't see it, or whichever, I don't know. But it'd be better if it was out in the open as to what was actually going forward. And to be fair, if it says you want to make it that the CEO has a chance to roll out overall car parks in future, could it not come back to NPA first as to what the outcomes are of this pilot scheme, rather than it just being rolled out and on all car parks for the future? But thank you.
Okay, thanks, Colin. Just in terms of the charges, I mean, members normally do, but I'm sure we approve the level of charges, but it's not part of this report. So I mean, I'll ask the officers. I'll be asking the officers. Officers will have a word with you after the meeting just to clarify the situation there. I think Michelle was first, and then Jane.
Just on the issue, I think the point of the report is, I suppose the question is, should 4 out of 5 car parking users bear the brunt of the cost of that car park, or should 5 out of 5 bear the brunt? And if only 4 out of 5 pays, then you end up charging that 4 out of 5 more than you should have to, because 1/5 choose not to pay. So the argument about costs, unfortunately, is the issue here is if there is a fee to be paid, whatever that fee is, the only fair thing to do is ensure that everybody pays it and shares that cost. And I think that the report is reasonable. It does say there will be a 12-month review, which I'm sure will be picked up and we can understand, but I don't see any reason in principle why we shouldn't do this. I think actually it'd be irresponsible not to do it if we know 1 in 5 are not. End of the day, we are spending public money here, and if we know that one group of people are not paying, then I think it's only reasonable that we seek to find ways to recoup that revenue. And I've no problem with this report, so I fully support.
Jane.
I agree completely with fairness that we need to do this pilot scheme. I'm just querying, is one car park enough to do it with? Should we perhaps not, to get a bit more statistical evidence, do it with maybe our 2 or 3 to start with? Only because then that would give us a bit more evidence at the end of the 1 year, rather than having it, well, one car park, because that would just be my query is, would it not be better to have a better statistical evidence on it?
Sure. Just to answer that one, because it was raised by one of the directors actually as well, about introducing a secondary site. I opted to go for one, just because of the amount of, I think, resource that goes into it. I wanted to give one location a lot of focus and attention to understand that in its entirety, instead of potentially spreading us over 2. Once I have that as the case of success, I feel that we would then be looking at not just an additional site, but maybe 2 or 3 that could follow that rollout. So I feel that one would be sufficient, I think, for us to get enough data and then look longer term for the rollout with more sites.
Yeah, I think the...
It's all right, go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point is, members will have seen that there's 4 points to the recommendation, and ultimately this is talking about moving it forward. What Lucas was just saying is that we'll do 1. It will involve the Recreation and Wellbeing Forum, both in explaining how this is going and then in part of the review, and I'm sure members on that forum will decide whether it's appropriate to bring something back to a full meeting of this authority or not as we move forward. But given the resources, we've got some resources to do 1. We're approving that, so that's the motion before us at the moment, and we are delegating further responsibilities, obviously, to the officers. But should members on the forum think it's a good idea to have a further discussion as we gradually move forward, then there's that. That's covered in the report. That's the way I read it. Did you want to say anything?
Yeah, just to say that we just reiterate that. Sorry, yeah.
My husband doesn't need to speak.
But just to say that obviously there's the other side of it where we're looking at the antisocial behaviour which you brought out, and there has been problems there before, and so that anything to generate some sort and to share any information with the police or whatever, that's with a different hat on, that would be very beneficial. But going forward, we've got to remember that this is the busiest car park. We're not going to get all the same. It's not for this meeting, but not every car park will be generating the same sort of return. But we'll leave it where we are. I fully support it from the start. We should continue with it. I mean, people, as you made the point, other people shouldn't have to pay for somebody else's, service. But yeah, I'm right behind it. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Heather. Well, the recommendation has been moved and seconded. I'll just remind you there are 4 points. I don't intend to read them all out, but there are 4 points to the recommendation. Will all those in favour please show? And against? And abstentions? Right, that's
Only on the last point.
Thank you, that's resolved.
Can I just actually clarify something for the future? We obviously were happy with this recommendation, but I think James mentioned a very important point about the pilot, and hopefully it will be a big success, and you'll come back to us in 12 months' time, and potentially we might want to apply that in other places as well within the areas of the National Park Authority. Janet mentioned the point about profit and that we can't make profit, but if I'm not, can you just clarify that if, for example, we make a profit on a specific measure, such as introducing ANPR, then that profit generated from a specific measure could be used to fix the costs and improve the situation, not only of a particular car park, but also the other car parks.
Yeah. Do you want to?
Tom, do you want to pick that one?
Yeah, I think there's a question around general principles here, and Richard's here if I get any of this wrong. Under our functional specific power of competence as a national park authority, we can do anything that is directly related to or antecedent to achieving our statutory purpose as a national park authority. And it's under that basis that we're allowed to charge for the delivery of service through car parking. That service in of itself, in terms of the cost of providing the car parking, makes a profit. But it's the point is across the whole of the National Park Authority, we're not able to make a profit as an organisation because we're a public body. We don't sub-hypothecate those costs back to an individual service. It goes back into the kind of general account for the National Park Authority as part of our earned income. We're able to. I'm satisfied, and Richard's nodding that we're able to do that under our functional specific power of competence.
And that's my understanding as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the
Thanks
other
for that
point,
Tom.
just around other locations, sorry, was just to say that, yes, absolutely, I'm confident within that year that we'll have all the data and hopefully, if it's performing the way it is, to come back with a clear steer as to which locations will be next, and then that the Wreck and Wellbeing Group can have that wider discussion about the suitability of that rollout.
Okay. Right, the next item is item 9, which is the review of parish forums. That's over to you, Tom.
Yeah, that's back over to me. So no presentation for this, members. We've had a couple of discussions around this already. Most recently at June National Park Authority, where I reported on the discussions that we had in the April round of parish forums, and then subsequently from 1 or 2 parish councils who'd also responded to a paper setting out the basis for a review of parish forums. I don't propose to go back over the reasons why we instituted that review. I indicated that we would come back to this meeting to seek approval from members on the basis of a series of recommendations to reform the way that we conduct our parish forums, and they're set out in sections 3.1 and 3.2 of the paper, and they are as follows: that we rename parish forums to be called community forums going forward, and that we extend attendance to those forums more widely to community groups and other organisations where they're known. Secondly, to merge the coastal and northern forums to form a single forum event covering those parish areas. I should note we're not proposing to make any changes to the way that parish elections are undertaken to nominate representatives to serve as National Park Authorities. We'll still do that in the 4 geographical areas of the National Park. The forum meetings will be held once a year, in addition to the joint National Park Forum event, which is coming up in a few weeks' time. And that whilst the location is ultimately the discretion of the chair, we should try and facilitate hybrid attendance where possible, which would encourage us to hold meetings here at Danby, where or other venues where we can allow people to join online. And then the last recommendation, just to kind of formalise the terms of reference for community forums in terms of facilitating that two-way flow of information between the authority, parish councils, and wider communities in their area. Should those proposals be accepted, we'd want to come back to members in 12 months' time just to review those arrangements and how they've been working. I think that's pretty much all I want to say, other than I was going to pick this up in my Chief Exec's report, Chair, that we held the annual management plan stakeholder forum last week on the theme of affordable housing. And I think what was clear to me out of that event is that it needs to ensure that we're engaging communities more widely is all the more important, and therefore I do feel quite strongly about the first of those recommendations about rebranding and reprofiling the forums to be broader community forums, not just parish council forums.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. We'll say more about the recent event when we pick it up later on. George.
Thank you, Chair. And when I read the report, it didn't come as a surprise at all to me, partly because I attended some of the meetings and the number of people who were present was quite on the low side. And also because I know from some of the meetings that I attended that this particular change, at the time it was a potential discussions about the potential change, was consulted with in those meetings. I remember actually one here in Helmsley where we had a debate on whether the current format of the parish forum should continue. I'm glad that officers took into account the comments and recommendations made, particularly about extending those forums to community groups and frankly any residents in the community who would be interested in attending. I think that's important, and also the hybrid format. So glad that we had those discussions, that officers have taken on board the recommendations, and that we are now in a position to move with this forward. So happy to propose or to second if anyone is also supportive of this.
I'll take that as moving the motion. Colin.
Chair, are we running this from this week when Northern Area meets, or is it just we're voting now and start next year? Basically.
Yeah, we're not proposing to hold a merged forum this autumn, Colin. So we'll be attending the Northern Forum as planned on Thursday. In fact, it'll be me in Pete's absence who covers that.
Okay, thank you. So it's been proposed and second. Can I just add? I mean, one of the downsides of this is obviously going from 2 meetings to 1. The community thing is great. It'd be interesting to see what people say about that. When I did discuss this with Tom, he reminded me that obviously parish councils can request to meet officers, and when they do, officers are very happy to either go along to parish councils or indeed to groups of parish councils. So we can certainly bear that in mind. And I think it just is a challenge communicating with parish councils. I say that as a parish councillor myself, as you know. And I think by involving the communities will be a step in the right direction to involve both parish members and other people. Although actually we have always allowed members of the public to come to the various forums. The extent to which they do and don't varies. I'll leave it at that. Did you want to say anything before we voted, John?
I thought you'd already said it, hadn't you, Cole? But I did want to say, well, I agree. We do have to recognise that this is a drop in the number of meetings, but it ought to be seen in a positive light. This is about extending communication. It's not about restricting how we engage with parish councils. And we just need to, we've all been to meetings, haven't we? We've been to dozens and dozens of meetings where 2 people and a tin of Heinz spaghetti hoops turns up. We can't be put off just because of a lack of engagement in that way.
Thank you, John. On that interesting note,
It's not about parishes, is it?
No.
It's community. It's not about parishes. You've got the mechanism to deal with parishes. This is about moving to. So I agree completely with the recommendations, but our relationship with the parishes is different to this. It's about the community. So thank you.
right, been moved and seconded. All those in favour?
Thank you.
I think that's unanimous.
Says, yeah.
Thank you all. That's unanimous.
National Park Authority trustee.
Yeah, so this is back over to me again. I seem to be having a few today. So this is I think just to in very, very simple terms, members will be aware that earlier on this year the North York Moors Trust approved a governance review, made some changes to its governance. The authority still has the right to nominate up to 3 trustees to serve on the board of the North York Moors Trust, to ensure we've got that strong partner and partner buy-in with the charity. Myself and Colin are trustees of the North York Moors Trust. I stood down as chair following those governance changes earlier on this year. Christine Robertson, who has just served her first 3-year term on the trust, has indicated to the chair that she doesn't wish to pursue reappointment as a trustee, which means that there is a vacancy pending on the Board of Trustees for a nomination from the National Park Authority. Any nomination ultimately has to be agreed or approved by the trustees and directors of the North York Moors Trust. It's an independent charity, but I'm certain that they'd look favourably on any nomination that was made by this authority. So the recommendation is to nominate a member to serve as a trustee of the National Park Trust.
Right, thanks, Tom. I mean, first of all, obviously, thanks to Christine for doing her 3 years on the trust. It's essential, isn't it, that the members are closely involved on the trust, and we have this two-way relationship which has been working very successfully for a number of years now. Are there any nominations? Colin?
Yes, Chair. Before I nominate, I would just like to say a big thank you to Christine for serving on the board for 3 years. It's only come about because we realised that all the board members were appointed at the same time, and we were all due to leave at the same time as well, which created a problem where there was only one board member left that knew what was going on beforehand for all new members to come in. So we asked if there was a possibility that some would like to retire early one way or another, and to be fair, Christine has, I have, but later on, this will actually help the trust going forward, because there is, rather than everybody withdrawing at once, you know, we have got a continuation of what's going forward. But I would like to nominate Janet to the to be part of the trust, if that was okay with you, Janet.
Thank you.
You're happy to do that, are you, Janet?
I am. Thank you.
Claire?
I would just like to second that nomination. Thank you very much.
Are there any more nominations? No? Everybody happy? We'll vote on Janet. Congratulations, Janet.
Thank you all very much.
Our new trustee. Thank you. Now we'll come to the reports for information. 11 is the feedback from league members and committees. Is it Colin first with FRAS?
I'll take it as read, Chair. I'll take it as read. If there are any questions, I'll try to answer them. If not,
right,
we'll move on.
Thanks for the report. Are there any questions?
No.
No. Thank you. Second was the joint forum, but the verbal was given previously.
There haven't been meetings of either the Rec and Wellbeing or the CLM forum since, so there isn't a report for this meeting.
Okay. EDI, Arnold's not here.
I think Joel might be able to give her
bring us up to date then, Joel.
Yes, the EDI group met last Wednesday, so we haven't had time to put a written report in, and in Arnold's absence, I'll just briefly update. We met at Sutton Bank, and we were reviewing physical accessibility, in particular in the context of National Park Centre and all that has taken place to develop our offer for people with a range of accessibility needs, and then also to have a challenge ourselves and to think about what more could be done and other things to think about. It was a very positive session. Certainly 4 members were present as part of that, so Arnold, Janet, George and Abida. and we had a really good tour round looking at the accessible paths. We also had a chance to look at the potential development of the new loop pathway, which is at the bottom end round the glider club and round through the other side, which hopefully, subject to all of the consents, will be something that could be done this year using Access for All funding, and that will make a very attractive opportunity for people to engage with nature. The other thing we understood a lot more about was the range of different accessibility vehicles that could be used. Obviously, we've concentrated a lot on trampers, but they're not universally accessible, and so adapted bikes and also wheelchair driven ones as well were looked at, and so again there's opportunities for us to improve our offer on that, and there was a very useful discussion at the end about where people thought we were and what else could happen next. So a very useful meeting of the forum.
And everybody agrees with that was there, so well done, Joe. I'm pleased that we're moving towards that circular route. We had a walk around there a few months ago, didn't we? And there were some issues to resolve. I'm pleased you're getting places with that. Any comments? No. The final one is local access forum, but that was on the 3rd of June. Isn't it?
Yeah, and it's I think we reported at last NPA. It's not due to meet until December, so there's no report for this authority.
Right. Nobody else has heard about that? Right, thank you. Then that brings us on to item 12, which is the report from members on the outside bodies. Right. Colin starting on the trust. Colin?
Is that me? Right.
I believe so.
Colin. Sorry, my assistant didn't send me his notes, so you've got me. Yes, going forward, Rebecca chaired her first meeting after taking over from Tom. We had a good meeting one way or another. The accounts have been filed for the last year. Next year's accounts are due in on the 31st of August. The Birds on the Edge project, we might get some funding to carry it on a bit further later on, but at the moment it's just pending. Stepping stones, 2 new schools were taken on from the beginning of September. At Linthorpe we have 3 classes of 30, Linthorpe Primary School, and at Newport I believe there's 2 classes of 25, and that is going very well. Going on, we got from the Shared Prosperity Fund with the Mayor of York and North Yorkshire, 100,000 grant towards green social prescribing, which has come in very nicely. Thank you very much, and we look forward to taking different projects forward. We had a review of which projects we were taking forward, because we thought, well, with James being on his own basically, there's only so much he can do. Admittedly, at the moment, he is going out and interviewing for another member of staff. Now, how far that has, I think it was only this month at some point when he and Rebecca are interviewing to take on another member, which going forward will be a great asset to us. I think, to be fair, that's about us. Thank you.
No, thanks, Colin. I mean, James is doing a great job there, and there's also a lot of good work going on there, isn't there? So a lot to get your teeth into. Tom.
Yeah, just one additional point as well, not from the meeting which Colin's ably covered, but in discussion with Jim, we thought it'd be useful for members to hear from James and Rebecca directly as as exec director and chair of the trust. So
we're hoping to arrange for them to come along and speak to members at the December National Park Authority meeting.
No, thanks, Tom. That'll be good. CNP, David's not here, but can you cover?
Yeah, David's not here, but I can say a little bit, partly because I had the chance to catch up with Rose O'Neill, the Chief Executive of CNP, last week, which was really useful as I'm picking up some additional responsibilities for National Parks England. So last week CNP published an update to a report they published in 2024 on the state of the environment in national parks, which was specifically focused on rivers and water quality in national parks. It particularly homed in on sewage discharges within watercourses in national parks. I think made the point that the general public would rightly expect water quality in national parks to be higher than it is elsewhere. And whilst there are some good signs, we're not treated any differently to other parts, and therefore I think it's basically trying to encourage government to think much more closely about how they and statutory undertakers like water companies can prioritise investment in national parks, something I think we would support. I also talked about, Rose also talked to me about the reforming of a new all-party parliamentary group for protected landscapes, national parks and national landscapes, which is due to convene for the first time later on in October, I believe. National Parks England previously provided the Secretariat to an APPG for national parks, which was wound down at the last general election. CNP have taken that on and are reforming that as a joint national landscapes, national parks group, which is good. So yeah, they were able to kind of provide the Secretariat for that and get the support from parliamentarians across all parties to recreate that group. And National Parks England, through the chair, will have some involvement in that group meeting.
Thanks, Tom. No, that's really good news, isn't it? Any questions? No. The housing board. I mean, that's not met, but it's changing, isn't it, Chris? I mean, into the strategic place partnership.
I'd just like to come back on that one. I did have a few different people ask when we had our meeting, but I still find it very disappointing that they haven't actually started the board up again in some form. It's just not happening. I think it's very disappointing.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The sort of focus for housing has gone to sort of sub-regionally, so it's now with the combined authority in terms of seeking the funding directly from Homes England. That's where the responsibility and the funding will be coming from. And we are assured that a strategic place strategy is being set up, which will involve the national parks, both national parks, and they will have presence at that. And that will then eventually replace the housing board. I will chase them up and just see where they are with that, so we can update on how long that will be. But it is happening, and there will be something that replaces the old housing board, but at a sub-regional combined authority level.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. I mean, you just mentioned, Clive, it was something that was discussed at the management plan event about affordable housing, which was excellent. I mean, I'll say something now, but rather than later, because it had all the right people in the room that were involved in delivering housing and housing policy, but particularly delivery. And the general view was that, first of all, it was good to have that meeting, but secondly, there was a need for another but more detailed discussion about some of the problems that have been faced by the various authorities in the room, and how we can move things forward, particularly around affordable housing, but also, I think, about the general issue of housing and helping communities to continue to thrive. So that was a good event. We're on Chief Executive's meeting.
Yeah, so it's my
Item 13.
my usual report for members. Happy to take most of it as read. Probably just draw out two things. I think that the first is the under item 3.6, the recruitment campaign for an independent chair of the Protected Landscapes Partnership, which is live, and encourage members to raise awareness of that. And also I've included a link there to the Landscapes Observatory, which is a fantastic piece of innovation that's been spearheaded by our colleagues in the Peak District National Park, working closely with Cranfield University to, in effect, use artificial intelligence to improve the resolution and imagery associated with landscape change and landscape on the ground, which provides a number of applications for future for both habitat monitoring, but also looking at how habitat restoration might be undertaken. It's a cracking piece of initiative and really demonstrates national parks being innovative in the use of technology. So massive credit to Simon Geeky and the team at the Peak District who've led that piece of work. I'm really impressed by it. The other thing, as you mentioned, Malcolm, was the joint stakeholder forum, which was held last week in Helmsley. Under the management plan, as part of the governance arrangements, there's a stakeholder forum which meets every year to review progress with the delivery of the National Park Management Plan, and I gave a summary of that at the meeting. But we also took the opportunity to deep dive at that session into the subject of affordable housing, which is one of the objectives within the management plan, where it's fair to say we, in the sense of the Royal We, are underperforming. We have set a target of 100 units by the end of the 5-year period of the management plan, which was ambitious, but we felt right to be stretching in terms of those targets. As it stands, we've approved as National Park Authority 9, I think, Chris, units as the planning authority, but so far there've been no completions within that period. And so, even though it's not part of our primary statutory responsibilities as the authority, we felt it was important to use that session to convene key stakeholders to come together and understand what's holding us back and how we can work together more effectively. And I certainly, as somebody who a non-expert in this area, felt that the session was generated an awful lot of enthusiasm, a clear sense of determination from key partners, particularly the Rural Housing Enabler, ourselves, the Combined Authority, and North Yorkshire Council, to really kind of get under the skin of the problem and try to work in an even more systematic way to try and generate much more of a pipeline of affordable housing, which is ultimately critical to the long-term viability of our communities and the delivery of the socio-economic duty. So, yeah, really, really good workshop, I thought, and I know members who were present also felt it was a really helpful session.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. It really was excellent. Jean.
Thank you. Not being part of that, I was just wondering, will that feed into how we're making, because I know we're doing some planning changes in how we're looking at the planning and that sort of thing. So will that feed back into that area?
Yes, I mean, the focus of the workshop was to try and identify barriers to affordable housing delivery, and there's a lot of good work that came out of that. A lot of things that we hadn't pre-identified, and a lot of things that are beyond our control, so at the national level. So there's a lot of impact on things like big changes in the planning system, big changes in government, COVID, massive increase in labour costs and construction costs, which is why there's been a reduction in house building nationally over the last sort of 5 years. At a general level, all the bodies that were involved there, and it was a brilliant workshop because we got 35 attendees, and it was the first time we got parish councils, rural housing enablers, North Yorkshire councillors, the housing authority, ourselves, and the combined authority in one room. And there was a combined, everybody came up with two key barriers that are ongoing. One is the local communities themselves and objections to planning applications, and only the parish councils that were in support of affordable housing turned up on the day, even though we asked those that had not been so supportive. So there was a missing link in the room, and that goes back to Tom's point about trying to engage communities more and talk to them about the fears and perceptions they have about affordable housing. And the second one was lack of sites. And it's not a lack of sites per se, it's a lack of landowners bringing sites forward. So your question is, yes, we will link that with the local plan review, which starts in a couple of months' time. And one of the first things we'll be doing in that is a call for sites, and we'll make it clear that we want landowners to put forward potential sites for not just affordable housing, but for general housing as well. So that's where that link is, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, as you say, Chris, it was quite interesting that that a number of issues were raised, and that the top issue that people wanted to talk about was the local opposition, which I found quite interesting. Right, final then on 14 is on the record. Number of items there. Anybody got any comments? No, simply for noting if there's no comments. Right. Item 15 is other business. Well,
on the appendix to the Chief Executive Report was our membership workshop for the National Park Management Plan review in July, which was, I want to say, was a very, very good event and was very helpful for me to sort of look at things, because obviously only having been a member for 2 years, it was really interesting to see what had already happened and how it's moving on, and to understand the really deep work that had obviously happened beforehand to while we were looking at the changes. But obviously to mention this is before the fire. So would it be appropriate that we had an additional time in which we looked at this perhaps, or touched at this again, maybe even just in one of our Tuesday meetings, because there may be additional things that need to be added into this from the fire. That's just all I wanted to say. Thank you.
I think yes is the short answer. I mean, the part of the reason for bringing members together earlier on this year is that we're 2.5, 3 years into the management plan. We're obliged under law to review them every 5 years. So the review would need to start in the next couple of years anyway. And undoubtedly, the impact of and learnings from the Fylingdales fire will, I think, be a significant feature. Probably one silver lining is attract more interest from key stakeholders in terms of their input and involvement in the next management plan review. So absolutely, Jane. As to when, I think probably we'll probably try and do this as part of a much more structured end-to-end project as part of the review of the management plan, which we'll start putting in place next year. So yes, but not yet, I think is the answer.
Thank you.
No, I think you do well to raise it, Jane. I mean, I thought it was a really useful event in any case. It was useful for those of us that have been here a while. It was useful for the new members. And we've almost gone full circle today, haven't we, this morning? Because it is quite clear that the fire is going to have a significant effect, A, on the delivery of the management plan as we have it, and B, on what goes in the next management plan that we will be talking about in a lot more detail later on. Okay, thank you. I have no other business. Is anybody else any other business? No. And with that, I'll close the public session of this meeting. 16 is to exclude the public.